Okay, let's look at the next function, and actually this time I'm slightly going to cheat because so the last function we looked at was compose, and the one we are going to look at now is composeK, or I should say the one we were supposed to look at now is composeK. So the thing is, composeK is right to left Kleisli composition, and so the thing is, I think it's kind of starting to click for me with Kleisli composition, but I'm not understanding it enough yet in order to feel comfortable talking about it like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna postpone this and probably a few others, like for example transducers, to the end of this video series. And as we've gone through, hopefully I've sort of kind of inadvertently, but also by trying to understand a bit more about category theory, I've hopefully managed to understand enough so that we can actually talk about Kleisli composition sensibly. Because surely, I mean, I've got to say, I'm definitely understanding tons more now than when we started this series, just for the mere fact of going through all of these functions. So hopefully maybe you feel the same way about learning a lot of things about like functional programming and sort of inadvertently or by accident about category theory as we go through these. But anyways, now I'm rambling. So I hope you forgive me for skipping composeK. We'll get back to it in the end of the series. But now let's move to composeP, which has nothing to do with Kleisli, but has to do with promises. So let's read the definition here. It says, composeP performs right-to-left composition of one or more promise-returning functions. The rightmost function may have any arity, the remaining functions must be unary. So it's composition again, right? And we don't actually really have to read the definition because it's the sort of the same as in composition or as in sort of the opposite of piping. So if you haven't watched the video on composition, make sure to do that first. But the difference here is that when we have a function that maps from y to z, it just doesn't just map from y to z, it maps from y to a promise of z. And this function maps from x to a promise of y. So the return functions so the return values are all promise wrapped, right? It's boxed within a promise. So it's not just mapping from one type to another type, it's mapping from one type to another type where this other type is wrapped within a promise. But of course, as many of these things in Ramda, it's extremely useful. Like, it's outrageously useful. I would assume we have, yeah, pipeP as well. Let's just check that. So see also pipeP, right? Which is the same thing. I mean, performs left to right composition of one or more promise returning functions. So if we go back to composeP, it performs right to left composition of one or more promise returning functions. So it's again the difference between compose and pipe, but now working on promises. So let's say we have a few fake promises, right? Let's define a function f, or yeah, maybe let's do something similar to what they're doing here. Like let's say get, like let's pretend we have HTTP requests or something like this. Yeah, so maybe something like this, right? So like maybe it's like get articles is a function that resolves to an array of, let's say, article IDs. Let's say, right? So this is just like we're building kind of a blog. And wait, promise.resolve. Wait, is promise native in JavaScript? Oh my god, I haven't done JavaScript for too long. I'm sorry, guys. but yes, so promise resolve, of course, I mean, promise.resolve 10, then we're resolving to 10, but we're returning a promise immediately. So that means I can say then, and then we get back an x, and then we can console log this x, for example. Right, and then we got, I think that's the 10 we got back, maybe. Let's say times 2. Yeah, that's the one we got back, right? So promise.resolve is just essentially a helper function, or a function in native JavaScript that returns, or maybe it's not native JavaScript actually. Wait, sorry. Now let's figure this out before we move on. Let's open the console here and say, do we have promise here? Yeah, of course. Okay, so native JavaScript. I was concerned about maybe it was Node rather than native JavaScript, but it seems it's native JavaScript. Anyways, side note. so promise.resolve is a function that creates a promise and will immediately resolve to this value. So we're pretending that we have this HTTP request. And then let's say that we have like get, not blog, but article, right? So maybe that's articles, and then there's a function called get article, but this takes an ID, right? And it returns, let's say there's a data structure here called articles that contains, well, where one points to, let's just add the type here. I mean, let's not think about this too closely, right? So let's say first blog post, and then 2 points to second blog post, and then third points to third blog post, and so forth and so forth, right? I mean, it's just an example. So we're pretending this is some state in a database on a server, and this is a function that sort of maps to an HTTP request where we will fetch this list of IDs so that we have articles that we can extract, and then get article is a function that extracts the body of any particular article. So again, like a promise function here. So promise.resolve, and we will resolve to essentially, well, articles under that ID, right? So the article under that ID. So that's not too bad, right? I mean, we're pretending that these are sort of HTTP requests, and we would, I mean, if we would just sort of do it trivially, maybe what we would do is we would say, okay, get articles, we invoke that, and then we say dot then, and what do we do then? Well, then we get back some excess, which are like the articles, and then let's say I'll grab the first one, so I'll do excess 0th, so this is a 0th, and then we'll say get article, right? So get article of that. But then I guess we could say then, and we would get back the value, so then we would say console log this X. Like, would that work, or am I misunderstanding the way this should be done? So let's map a keystroke to running this file, and let's run this file. Get articles is not a function. It's a oh, sorry, of course. I mean, it needs to be a function which takes no arguments, and when you invoke it, you get this resolved promise back. So let's run that. Yeah, and then we get first blog post. So if I did 1 here instead, we would get article, yeah, the second article instead. So yeah, maybe there's a better way of doing that, but either way. So actually, I think I'm introducing unnecessary complexity by working with these arrays. So actually, let's start with something more simple, or let's do something more simple. Let's say that we have a list of so an object of comments where the comment with ID 1 is, well, hello first comment, something like that, right? We're still thinking of this in terms of like a blog or something like that, right? But this is hello first comment, hello second comment, or sorry, second comment and third comment, where so this is 2 and 3, and then we have, yeah, let's say articles, but let's say that these are objects where you have, no, actually let's do it that way, right? Let's say author, and let's add, yeah, so let's do it that way. So the author of the first article is John, and then 2, and the author of that is Jane, and then let's remove this stuff, okay? And then instead of comments, we will have authors, and then these keys will be the identifiers, which is John and Jane, and then let's skip that one. And actually, of course, maybe these should be structures as well, where the name here would supposedly be John, but then actually, yeah, so that's okay, this is Jane and Jane, okay, but then the keys should probably be yeah, so let's just say author 10 and author 20. So I'm just using a different order of magnitude, not because it has any significance, but just in order to be able to differentiate between the ID articles and the articles for the authors. So I'm sorry for all this confusion. So let's say we have some authors and we have some articles, right? So articles are written by authors, and we sort of map these by IDs, right? So the author that has the ID 10 has the name of John, and the article that has the ID 1 is written by the author that has the ID 10, so then John. And then maybe we would say title here. So let's add a title to both of these actually. So let's say title first post, and this would be second post, right? So then let's say that we have, yeah, so let's skip these, right? And let's say we have a function called getArticle that takes some ID and immediately resolves, returns a promise that immediately resolves with the article under that ID, right? And then we can say getAuthor, which takes an ID and immediately promise.resolve resolves to the author with that ID. Okay, so sorry about all this confusion. Okay, so the reason we do that is that we can then say, so we say, instead of get articles, we say get article with ID, let's say 1. Then when you have that article, what do we do with that article? Well, we say, actually I'm realizing this is probably not in any way more easy. Yeah, never mind, sorry about this massive excursion. Let's try to solve the other one later, but now let's stick to this. Okay, I'm sorry. So then when we have this A, we would have to say get author using a dot author. We remove that, and then here we get author. So let me use proper variable names. So here we have an author, and here we have an article. So instead of A, here we use article. And if we run that, I'm missing a parenthesis. Where am I missing a? Here I'm missing a parenthesis. And then, yeah, so then we get back the author whose name is John. But of course, this is why I got stumped. Like, of course, this doesn't make it any or easier in any sense, because we are here. Like when we have the article, we also have an object that we have to do some kind of interaction with. So it's not. That's a bit stupid. I guess what we should do in order to make it more simple is instead of getting an article, we should say get author from article, and when but then we would have to do, yeah, so okay, so there's some level of complexity. Let's simplify the scenario further, and then let's introduce more complexity. So let's say that when we ask for articles, let me comment this out, and so let's say that when we ask for articles 1, or actually maybe we could say it this way. So maybe it's articles authors. So it's the mapping between these. So when we ask for article 1, we get back the ID of the author. And when we ask for the ID of the article 2, we get back 20, which is the author of the of that article. So it's a mapping between authors and articles. And yeah, I mean, this doesn't really make any sense, but we'll get to it in a moment. So why would I do this? Well, then we would have another function, which is get article author. I pass an article ID, and I immediately resolve a promise. I return an immediately resolved promise with the article author that has that particular ID. Let me actually rename that article authors. No, articles author probably makes more sense. Well, actually, let's pluralize it. And I forgot the pluralization here. So then I would say get, so yeah, because then we could do something more simple. Let's comment that out. We could say get article author, and I'll pass 1, and then I have an author ID, which I can directly pass to get author, like so, and then close that. Let's just see if that works first. Article authors, so I misspelled it here. We need pluralization here. Let's run that. Yeah, sorry, so, and we need to say then console log. Can I do just that, like so? Yeah, so we can console log after that. And then that works fine, right? So sorry about all this confusion. So this is the way this is a simple scenario that we should have pushed for from the beginning. Maybe I should have just taken their example. Anyways, but the thing is that if you look at the structure here, we are taking the variable that we get back, or the result that we're getting back, and directly passing it through the next, into the next function. Or if you think about it, we are piping it into the next function. And if you can think of something usefully as a pipe, then you can also definitely think of it as a compose. So what we are saying is get author after get article author, or get article author and pipe that into get author. I assume promises work in a way which allows me to do this as well. Let's just see if that works. Yeah, so that's the way promises work. And then it's extremely obvious, right, that we're doing that. We are in some sense saying, so this is like F, and then this is G. So it's G after F. So it's G compose F, right? G after F. Or if you think about it in terms of pipes, it's F and then G. And this is why we can use composeP. So we can say, okay, these are promises. Promises follow this particular syntax with then, like they're thenable. So instead of doing it this way, we could say R.composeP, and then we say, okay, get author after we've done get article author, right? Let's call that P, like that's our promise function. And what's the useful part about this? Well, the useful part is here I hard-coded 1. So actually what I can do now is I can say P of 1 then console log. Okay? Let's comment out that stuff as well and let's run that. Same result, right? We're saying construct a new function that we call P, and this function is the composition of get author after get article author. And of course, we could have used pipe, right? So we could have said pipe and do this thing first and then this thing. That should give us the same thing. It also gives us John back. So we are piping promises. So the key point here is, of course, that it's reusable. So now we have this function P that we can pass 1, but we can also pass 2, and then we get Jane back instead. Now, of course, you might say, oh, well, of course, this is also, we can also do that here, right? We could say, well, let's say P2 is a function, or it's a function that takes an ID, yeah, and returns this, where 1 is ID, right? And then, so let's compare, right? So then we do whoops, what happened now, sorry. So P2, so P run with 2, and actually let's call this P1 here. So P1 is the one is the promise function that we constructed using PipeP, and P2 is the one we constructed manually, and we're passing the ID 2 to both of them. So let's look at that, right? Why did I get undefined somewhere? So am I console logging multiple? Yeah, sorry, so P2 console logs automatically. That was stupid of me. Sorry, so this is what the function should be. Okay, so yeah, and both of them work. Like both of them give the expected result. And let's just think about this. Could we condense this? Could we make this point free? Could we, can we say like so? No, we can't, right? And that's the key point, right? We can't remove the point. Like we can't make it point free P2 because then we would need to say this is a composition, this is a pipe where you first do this thing and then you do this thing. So we have to sort of explicitly mention a variable here, which in some sense then is the benefit of using pipe here instead. So if we put those two side by side, you can see the difference. But, okay, I think you're kind of following along so far, but let's look at something more interesting. Let's go back to the original scenario where we had a bit more complication, right? Like, let's say we don't have this strange, weird articles authors sort of construction. so let's forget about that, right? Like, let's actually remove, yeah, let's remove all of these, and let's just think about it, okay? So, and actually let's remove that, and let's remove this. And let's remove this. Okay, so we have articles and we have authors. And the question is, well, if we say get article, okay, and we pass an ID such as 1, or let's say 2 again, and then we say then, and then I have an article. Oh, sorry, now I'm retyping the same code. And then we want to say get author, given the, let's see, author of that article. Why did I remove authors from here? Sorry, sometimes I'm just so confused. So this article author is 10 and this author is 20, okay? So then we want to get that author, right? And then we console log that, right? And then console log. Okay, so let's look at that. Unexpected identifier author, yeah, because I forgot parentheses. So let's, or sorry, comma, yeah, comma here. Oh my god, okay, like so. And then we get Jane back, right? So that seems to work, okay, that's fine. Now what? Well, this doesn't look super nice. It would be nice if we could still sort of say, well, get author and then, or get article and then get author. That would be kind of cool. So it's something like, well, we need a function that sort of extract, or let's say pick, or let's just call it author actually. So something that like when given an article will return the author. So it's essentially article dot author, right? So what we are doing here is we are doing, let's retype that line, right? We're saying then we have the article, and then we're saying get author from author of the article, right? That should be sort of the same thing. If we run that, what did I do? Okay, sorry, parentheses. That works, right? That's the same thing. And now we can see, okay, actually that's a pipe or a compose, right? So it's the composition of get author after author. So it's R.compose get author and author. Let me see if I get the parentheses right. Right? And then we don't need this point because it's a composition. Okay, it's pretty clean. Still works, we get Jane, right? Okay, but then maybe we could go back to the other and remove this point as well, because like if we make this a function, let's say we have a function p that we pass an ID and we want to return this, and we don't want to explicitly have that point, so let's remove the console log there and say, well, p of 2 then console log, kind of like what we were doing before. This still works, right? But we have this ID here and we're trying to get rid of this point, so maybe we could use R.pipeP. I'm just using pipeP because it's easier for me to think about. So pipeP rather than composeP. And we want to say, well, I want to first get article, then I want to compose get author and author. That should maybe work, right? It works. We still get the same result. And of course, if I'm using pipe here, maybe I'd want to use pipe here. So we're saying pipe author and then get author. So I'd say this is pretty compact, kind of clean, right? For sure, a lot cleaner than when we were manually expressing the sort of promises. And this is really the power, again, like the power of functional programming. This is like you just dense down your code to something which is absurdly readable. So you're saying I have this pipe, P is this pipe of promises, where we first ask for the article, then I've got this sort of local pipe where I need to extract the author from that article, and then I need to get the author. Another way of doing this, let's think about this. So author is unnecessary, right? Now we're sort of going bananas, but just to think about this. So author is unnecessary because we have R.prop where we could extract the author. I guess that would be the same thing. That works fine, right? So there's the prop function in Ramda where we extract a property from an object. So that's even more clean, I would say, because then we don't have that function. But the question, I guess, is, can we somehow avoid this pipe here? I'm just thinking, can we somehow, yeah, it's probably not better, right? Because what we could do is we could say we pipe R.prop author into promise.resolve, and then we do get author. So depending on the way you look at it, this didn't, yeah, I'm just missing a comma. That didn't work. Unhandled promise reject. Not a constructor. Promise resolve. So I wonder if that's... Yeah, so I guess that has something to do with binding. Like if I do bind, sorry, let's just quickly look at how do you do. So if you say bind and then you bind to some context, so what would I do? Would I say bind it to promise? Yeah, that actually works, but I can't just say promise.resolve. Then I have error. So let's not think about that too much because it's not super clear. I mean, as in it's not super clear. Like this version here is not super clear. But this is also, of course, another way you could do it. And what I mean is that the reason you might want to do this is that you're separating the local stuff from the network stuff. Like if we assume that get article and get author are both sort of network requests, HTTP requests that take time, this is just actually a local request that will immediately resolve, and we are separating that just to be for like sake of clarity, or for the sake of clarity. So I mean, I guess there are pros and cons. And of course, if we think about this, I mean, you could probably do, we could construct a function which we call promisify, that when given an x, returns a promise that immediately resolves to that x. Like, I guess that's a way of cleaning this up, because then we could say R.prop author and then we pipe it to promisify, like so, and that works, right? So that's maybe a bit more clean, because promisify is probably like super useful where we don't have to worry about this sort of context problem. And then yeah, I mean, if we had the author function, so if we assume that was something a bit more complex than just prop, then this would also be very clean. So like, well, actually we don't need to specify. So we could say that author is the prop of author, or the function author is r.prop of author, meaning that we'll rewrite this to author promesify, right? Pretty clean, pretty clean. I missed the comma. Let's run again. Name Jane, right? So we get the correct thing back now. So this is, I mean, I'd say this is looking pretty clean for being like a network thing, right? And like, of course, this could be a super complex network request, and this could be a network request, and this could be any series of sort of complex transformations where you do this and add another one and then do another network call and so forth and so forth. Like, so clearly, like, this is better than the pyramid of doom, and clearly, I'd say this is also better than normal promise handling, like just using the thens. Like, this is much more clean. And yeah, I guess I would probably use compose here actually. Like, I would probably say promesify author, just to make it super clear that when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, this is something that's being promisified, or promisified, I should probably say. And what it promisifies is the result of author. So that would of course work as well. And yeah, that is it. That is it. And of course, as with compose and as with pipe, as they say here, I mean, the rightmost function may have any arity, while the remaining functions must be unary, right? So in this case, this function must be unary and this function must be unary, but this function can actually have a higher arity. So that when we call something here, we could pass more arguments here. So again, like the first function in your pipe or the last function in your compose, in either way, the first function that will be invoked when the pipe is in, or the compose is invoked, that function can have a higher arity than 1, or an arity higher than 1. Whereas the other functions, of course, need to have an arity of 1. So, you know, I mean, hopefully you're saying like how you're like, oh, well, I could build a super simple DSL for myself with this, and like all my network requests would be fantastic. Yeah, for sure. For sure, because then, like, I mean, P here could be like, maybe we pass get article as the first one and then the ID is the second one, something like this. I mean, like, there are tons of possibilities of making this more clean. Actually, specifically the thing I said now was maybe not a good idea, but yeah, I mean, you can probably see how you can use composeP and promesP to significantly simplify the way you interact with promises. I mean, it's like when you do network stuff or when you do delayed stuff, promises are extremely helpful, but then being able to abstract sort of one level above over promises is extremely helpful. Like, there's another level. Anyways, that is it for composeP and for pipeP. So let's remove this stuff and let's move on to the next one.